Good evening. My name is Dr. Brian Henning, and I am Professor of Philosophy and Environmental Studies here at Gonzaga University. And it's my honor to also serve as the director of our Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment, the host for this evening. It's also my pleasure to serve as the moderator of this, our third annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum. Thank you all for being here in the Globe Room and also at home via streaming. Hi, everybody at home. Please note that the event is being recorded and will be posted on our past events library within a few days if you want to catch it again. In the spirit of the Jesuit practice of the composition of place, I would like to begin by acknowledging that Gonzaga University and all of Spokane resides in the homelands of the Spokane tribal people. This land holds the cultural DNA and the spirit of the first people of this place, the people of the river. It is their ancestors who are here and bring forth the power of this place, the knowledge that comes from the land. We are grateful to be on this land and ask for its support as we work to manifest our intentions during this gathering of hearts, minds, and spirits. I want to thank you all who have joined us here in person and online after a really very difficult summer marked by prolonged periods of unhealthy air, from dozens of wildfires burning 500,000 acres in our state alone, an intense heat wave that killed at least 20 of our neighbors here in Spokane and more than 100 people across our state. It seems all the more urgent to hear candidates' views on such a pressing issue. So once again, thank you and welcome. Thank you for attending this third annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum. The event this evening is hosted by this new Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment, informed by an abiding commitment to a just society and care for the planet. The Gonzaga Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment seeks to serve our campus and the Inland Northwest by promoting innovative interdisciplinary scholarship, teaching, consulting, and capacity building on the issues of climate, society, and the environment. The 2021 Climate Forum is co-sponsored by the organizations listed up on the screen. I encourage you to learn more about these wonderful groups by visiting them online. Addressing the challenge of climate change will require actions in many forms. These groups are crucial in supporting the systemic changes that really only come about through collective action. The Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum was created in 2019 out of the belief that democracy only works if citizens are aware of the most pressing issues and if they vote. We believe that climate change is an issue of vital importance to our community and to the world. Contrary to how it's commonly presented, climate change is not primarily a partisan issue. According to studies by the Yale Center for Climate Communication, 74% of Americans, 74%, describe themselves as either cautious, concerned, or alarmed about global warming, whereas only 20% of Americans are either doubtful or dismissive. The great majority of people in Spokane are interested in candidates' views on global warming and what they would or would not do to help Spokane mitigate its causes and adapt to its effects. A little bit about our rules for engagement this evening. Right? It is true, of course, that discussing climate change can be complicated, so it's important to discuss how we will engage with these issues tonight. At Gonzaga, we take very seriously the importance of modeling the civil discourse that we expect of our leaders. So to create a welcoming space for dialogue, please follow the following rules. Please, no booing, no clapping, and no cheering. If a candidate says something you like, hold up the green sheet of paper. So practice. We got a green sheet, right? We got the cues. All right. If a candidate says something you don't particularly like, you can hold up the red card, right? So you can, a little audience participation, but it doesn't have to degenerate into something unpleasant, so we can all stay civil but still share our views. If you don't have one of these colored sheets of paper and you'd like one, just raise your hand now and volunteer. We'll happily bring one to you. The format of our question and answer session tonight. The Climate Forum follows a format used in presidential debates, though of course we hope the candidates do not follow that example in the way that they answer. Candidates will each be asked a question, and they will have 2 minutes to respond, and there'll be up to 1 additional minute at the discretion of a moderator to facilitate further discussion if it's needed. At the end of the forum, each of the candidates will have up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement. In a new tradition this year, the forum will be co-moderated by 2 students, Laurel Burlingame and Will Merritt. Audience, as we've not yet started the questions, let's for a moment suspend the rules and against applause, and please join me in bringing them up to the stage. Laurel is a junior here at Gonzaga University studying psychology and sociology with a minor in leadership. I like the green card, that's good. You got the right spirit. She's originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado, and she's passionate about exploring the great outdoors and protecting our common home. Thank you for joining us tonight, Laurel.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can give her a hug. Yeah, that's good. Go ahead. That's good. Our second moderator this evening is Will Merritt. Will is a senior at Lewis and Clark High School, where he is student body class president. In addition to that impressive distinction, he is also vice president of the Spokane Public Schools Student Advisory Council on Climate Change, which goes by the shorthand SAC3 or SAC3. As this is an odd year, in so many ways, right? Calendar-wise. As this is an odd year, we have the ability to focus solely on local races for city council and school board. Let's start first by briefly explaining how city council elections work here in Spokane. Our city is divided into 3 different districts, with 2 city council members representing each district, for a total of 6 city council members. Roughly east of Division and north of the interstate is District 1, or the Northeast District. District 2 includes everything south of the river, and District 3 includes everything west of Division and north of the river, or the Northwest District. City Council's 4-year terms are staggered, so half of the 6-member council seats are up for election every 2 years, 1 in each district. School board elections, on the other hand, do not involve districts. The Spokane Public School Board of Directors is composed of a total of 5 citizens, publicly elected to represent the community. School board directors serve staggered 6-year terms, so this year, director positions 3 and 4 are up for election. After the primaries earlier this year, and every year, we invite all of the candidates who were successful in their primaries. So that involved inviting 6 candidates for city council and 4 candidates for school board to attend this forum. As you might have heard, one candidate, Tyler LeMasters, who was running for city council in South Hill District 2, is unable to join on the ballot because the judge found that he did not meet the residency requirement, so his name will not appear on the ballot in November. 2 other city council candidates will also not be joining us this evening. Mike Lish, who is running for council in Northwest District 3, did not respond to our repeated attempts to reach him. And Jonathan Bingle, who is running for council in Northeast District 1, declined our invitation to attend this forum. Similarly, candidate Melissa Bedford, running for school board position 3, and candidate Kata Dean, running for school board position 4, declined the invitation to join us. Candidate Daryl Geffken, running for school board position 3, initially accepted, but later withdrew for unstated reasons. So we have our table of nameplates of people we wish were here. I will leave it to you and voters in Spokane and at home to decide what to make of Lish, Bingle, Dean, Bedford, and Geffken not making the time to come and talk about climate change. We'll leave that to you to decide. However, we are delighted that we do have with us this evening 3 candidates for City Council, representing among them each of the city's 3 districts, and 1 candidate for Spokane School Board. Candidates, as I call your name, please do feel free to join me on the stage. And audience, help welcome each candidate with a warm round of applause. In district order, I would like to welcome candidate for City Council Northeast District 1, Naghmana Sherazi. Candidate for City Council South Hill District 2, Betsy Wilkerson. should put them on both sides, huh? And you are in the middle next to her. Candidate for City Council, Northeast District 3, Zappone. And finally, candidate for School Board Director position 4, Riley Smith. Fix your nameplate here. Candidates, a reminder of our format. Laurel, Will, or I will pose a question. Actually, Laurel and Will pose a question, and you will have 2 minutes to respond. At a moderator's discretion, there will be up to an additional minute to facilitate further discussion. Our timekeeper this evening is my colleague, Dr. Pat McCormick, here in the front row. Pat will hold up a sign when there are 20 seconds remaining, so it looks like that, and a sign that says stop when time is up. Candidates, please do be attentive to keep the timekeeper in mind so we can give everyone equal chance to speak. And audience, please remember that now, if you would like to express your views, please just use the red and green cards, but please do not cheer or boo or clap or otherwise make disruptive noise. Sound good? All right. So let's begin. Laurel, why don't you start us off?
Hello, candidates. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'll be asking the first question, and I'd like to start broadly. Imagine that we are 10 years in the future, and we have made many of the changes necessary to begin addressing the climate crisis. How did we do it? In other words, what is your vision for successfully addressing climate change today? Candidate Sherazi, to repeat, what is your vision for the future of Spokane, and how will we address the climate crisis? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me well? Perfect. 10 years from now, I would really like very much to see Spokane as a thriving, inclusive city that has really embraced sustainability and a circular economy. Because we can't do anything for our children to be successful unless we start it now. This is the main reason why I am running, is to make sure that there is a better world for my son to inherit tomorrow and the children, others who are like him. For us to be welcoming, for us to be successful, for us to have jobs that are linked to a green industry and a green economy and a green environment. This is my vision for Spokane 10 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Sherazi. Candidate Wilkerson, same question to you. What is your vision for the future of Spokane? How will we successfully address climate change? You have 2 minutes.
My vision is very much like Naghmana's to see a, am I not on? Okay, quick. Never met a mic I didn't like. So my vision is very much like Naghmana's, to see a thriving community. But I'm just going to be a little bit more specific and address what I see as climate change in the communities of color. There is a significant deficit that has been addressed. There is a stigma that African Americans don't care about climate change. I want to dispel that. With all the issues that African Americans face, lack of employment, police brutality, schooling, education, we have put environmental concerns kind of on the back burner. Not because it's not important, because we had so many other societal ills that we had to address. So my vision would be that all communities of color are engaged in this new economy, that is green, that is inclusive, that our city is healthy, that our river is healthy, that everybody has an opportunity to thrive, and that downtown is more representative of all the people that live in Spokane.
Thank you, candidate Wilkerson. Candidate Zappone, what is your vision for the future of Spokane and solving the climate crisis? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think 10 years from now is just the beginning of the changes that we're going to see, and that's going to take long-term changes. And going beyond that, I see a future where we're focusing on the 21st century infrastructure that we need in our city. That's a lot of public transit, walkable neighborhoods, and areas that make our community a better place and decrease our reliance on fossil fuels in our economy. I'm excited to see technology that's going to continue to develop in the future and how that's going to help expedite this process. But turning towards more opportunity here, I think there's also going to be changes around housing that we could be making, more dense neighborhoods, changing our zoning policies around that and making it more possible to have those walkable neighborhoods. And the last part I think is really important that we need to talk about is the resiliency, because we're going to have to deal with the climate impact of today. Like Dr. Henning mentioned, we have 20 people that died this summer from climate change impact. We're going to have to look at how can we make our buildings safer for people, having air filters in our buildings, how are we going to be having shelters for the heat, and all the different impacts that we're going to be seeing and continuing to see into the future. And as the previous candidates mentioned, this all needs to be looked at through an equitable lens and looking at the communities that are most impacted, because that's happening today. Right now, we know that historically marginalized communities are the most impacted when it comes to their health outcomes. We see it, and so we need to be focusing on that and planning for the future.
Thank you, candidate Zappone. Candidate Smith, what is your vision for the future of Spokane and solving the climate crisis? What role might education and the school board specifically play? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Can you all hear me all right? Awesome. So I'm going to talk more specifically about the schools and climate change, and I think that really our action is going to have to be twofold in the next 10 years. One lens that we're going to have to be looking through is the infrastructure of our physical school buildings. How do we get students to and from schools? Can we electrify our system in 10, 20 years? That's something that we should be exploring now, so we can be prepared for the future. How can we phase that in? How can we make our schools and neighborhoods more walkable, as Mr. Zappone said, so students don't have to take a bus or drive a car to get to school. They can ride their bike and they can walk and they can do it safely. I think secondly, it comes down to the curricula that we're teaching in our schools. Are we teaching climate-focused curriculum? Are we teaching our students about the impacts of climate change? You know, something that I talk about a lot is that I spent 13 years in this school district, and I graduated and learned more about climate change in the 2 years after I graduated than the 13 years that I spent in Spokane Public Schools. So it starts with, can we teach our students, what does it mean to compost? What are the impacts of composting? Can we teach our students in 20 years when you're a homeowner, what are the impacts of putting solar panels on your home, on your business? Because we want to be preparing our students for the future and taking these lessons that we're teaching them through the education system and living those out in their everyday lives. The real change for climate change is going to happen in our schools. It has to start from the bottom up and educating our youth all the way up through, our seniors as well.
Off to a good start. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Laurel. Well, if you can make sure your microphone is nicely, yeah, perfect. All right, it's all you.
Hello, candidates.
A little closer.
Hello, candidates. As you know, Spokane government positions, such as city council and school board, have the potential to be very influential in making decisions that save our city. Candidate Wilkerson, the second question is very straightforward. What knowledge or experience do you have that would help you make informed decisions on climate policies as they relate to the Spokane city? To repeat, what knowledge or experience do you have that would help you make informed decisions on climate policy for Spokane City? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. The first step I would do in making a decision on climate change is really you have to hear from your community and the people who are vested in making change. Fortunately, right now, City Council does have a policy person dedicated to that work, giving us information. As a Black person, I gotta tell you, climate change wasn't high on my list of things that I was addressing when I came on City Council. But in the last 2 years, as I have heard from both sides about climate change, for and con, I have educated myself more. So really it's doing the research, talking to the people in the business, i.e., I will talk to Avista. Avista has some real concerns, okay? Thank you for sharing that. I have some others on our sustainability action who are doing this work around climate change. What do they have to say? This is a group of 30 committed citizens in various fields that have come together to direct and guide policy for the city. So the city, yes, but I know that climate change really comes from the federal, the state, and then the local level. It will take all three to get where we need to be.
Thank you, Henning. Now to you, candidates opponent. What knowledge or experience do you have that would help you make informed decisions on climate policies as you evaluate to Spokane City? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, my background is in education. I'm a teacher, public high school teacher, and a public health worker. I work at Better Health Together. My background is not in climate change policy, but I spent a lot of time studying how policy is made, how we can ask the questions to determine what's efficiencies, and how do we address the challenges in our community. I got my master's in public policy and studied urban planning, and those are the types of skills that I will bring with me to council. I like to think that I'm a really quick learner and spend the time digging into issues really deep. And so I look at the things that experts put out and look at those resources. So that's turning to the Sustainable Action Committee and looking at the report that came out and learning lots from there. Turning to other groups and activist groups and advocacy groups, many of them mentioned here tonight and co-hosting it. So I like to look to the experts and listen to them about what are the best policies, what can we be doing, and then assessing them and asking questions and follow-up and trying to dig deep into the policy to figure out what's right. And I've been learning lots about climate change over the last, or not climate change, but climate change policy here in the city of Spokane, and glad to see that we're doing a lot of work around that right now, and excited to keep working with those stakeholders. I've spent time reaching out to them and talking to them throughout the last year, and so I'll continue to do that.
Just to invite you to expand on that a little bit more, candidate Zappone. So in terms of your experience as a teacher or as a healthcare worker or in your experience, your education, what do you think that brings specifically to the work of City Council on this issue?
Yeah, I think in those realms, you can see how climate change impacts different communities and how you can think of cross sectors. Because climate change is not a sole issue of environmental policy, but it's an economic issue, it's a healthcare issue, it's an education issue. And so it's really looking at how can I bring my background in those areas and infuse climate policy into that. And those are areas that I can bridge those gaps. I like the curveball there, wasn't ready for it.
Thank you, candidate Zappone. Candidate Smith, if you're elected to the school board, what knowledge or experience do you have that would help you make informed decisions on climate policies as they relate to the Spokane public schools?
Yeah, so like the other two, I'll admit I'm not an expert on climate change or climate policy, but what I'm really good at is listening to people and understanding who knows more about something than I do. I am willing to learn and grow in this position and elevate the voices who have really been doing the work in our community over the past 2, 3, 4 decades in uplifting that work. I'm really good at doing the research and understanding what are the best practices in terms of not just climate policy in general, but climate policy within the schools. And I also have lived experience in other communities that have been addressing climate change more rapidly than Spokane, to be quite frank. I spent 4 years in Seattle, who still has some ways to go when addressing climate change, but I know what it looks like when you have a compost bin next to every trash can in the whole entire city, and you know what goes in which bin: compost, recycling, and trash. I've lived in a place where I don't have to own a car, and I can travel on bus and train and get from point A to point B, and I know the value that that serves not only just environmentally, but economically for families, and socially, being able to get from point A to point B without sitting in traffic, breathing in disgusting fumes that are, hurting our community. So, like I said, I'm not an expert in climate policy, but it's something I am passionate about. And one reason I ran at the age that I did was to elevate that conversation to a higher level, because my generation right now is the one really dealing with the impacts of climate change over the past 2 centuries. So I really have a vested interest in this for myself, so I can leave a better place for my kids when that day comes.
Thank you, David. Now on to candidate Sherazi. What knowledge or experience do you have that would help you make informed decisions on climate policies as they relate to Spokane City?
That's a great question, and I'm going to have to go back a little bit further into my life. I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan, which is a third world country. So the way that we do sustainability or recycling, for instance, it's very different from how we do it here. I've lived and worked on 4 different continents. So what I'm doing is bringing lived experience of what I have seen happening there in different parts of the world and trying to bring it over here. And I never in a million years thought I would ever run for any kind of office when I moved here 10 years ago. But very quickly I realized that there were a lot of like-minded folks who wanted the same thing that I did: make a better world, make a better environment, ecology, everything that was related to making a better world for our children. Resultantly, I became very passionate about within a few advocacy groups. I began to understand for the first time in my life what it means to be involved with making sure that the river is clean, that our aquifer doesn't always contain PCBs. I finished a second bachelor's degree in cytogenetic technology, which is a med tech, a person who looks at people's chromosomes and DNA and figures out anomalies. And very quickly, it was brought upon me that there are epigenetic systems in place which if you have one allele and you have one gene and you weren't born with the other gene, and chlorine, for instance, goes and does something, messes up this one particular gene, so now you have, this is called a 2-hit hypothesis. And any one of us can have that. And so it is so important to understand and realize the things that we do today, the things that we are going through, are going to be impactful later on. So these are the experiences and my passion that I bring with me to Spokane City Council. And the hope is that I will not be doing it alone. There are a lot of people around here with me who will help me with it.
Thank you. I would like to ask a follow-up question. So each one of you guys would have a minute to answer. And a couple of you touched on the fact that climate change is beyond just the city level, and it's also on the federal and national level. So my question is, what experience do you have advocating or working with our representatives in federal and national government? We'll start, we'll just go down the line. With you first, Mr. Zappone.
I went to college in Washington, D.C., so I have a lot of friends who work in actually the White House and in Congress. Not representatives, unfortunately, so they don't have the voting power, but they work in policy think tanks, and so those are some of the people that I turn to and advocate for. Here at the state level, have great representatives to the state legislator and work with them a lot, too.
Okay. One of the things that I ended up doing because of being very particularly involved with a lot of local groups, I made friends in Olympia who are advocating on the state level. I've been endorsed by Senator Billig, by Representative Marcus Riccelli, by Representative Tim Ormsby, and a host of other people who work in the legislature. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that the Build Back Better plan, which is on a federal level, doesn't affect us here on the city level, but at the end of the day, how we present it to our communities, how we bring engagement about, how we address it to our senators and push it forward, that matters. So these are things that I can bring with me.
Candidate Wilkerson, I'll ask the question again just so we're clear. What experiences do you have advocating or working with our representatives in federal and national government?
Well, first of all, I have a lot of work in the advocacy field in Spokane with different nonprofit groups that have deep reaches into other areas. So really, it's about relationships and the people you connect with. On the city level, I have formed quite a good relationship with my other council members and the president of the council to work together. And when we do that, we bring about good policy. Example, when we had the heat wave, and the city council changed the policy on how hot it had to be to open a cooling shelter. And we changed the policy on how cold it has to be to open a warming shelter. That was good. Then at the state level, I too have those relationships that Naghmana mentioned, way longer than I would like to admit to any of you in here, and working with them. And you know what? It's at the professional level, but it's also at the personal level where you could have those conversations and make those decisions and go forward with that activism.
Thank you. Same question to you.
Yeah, I similarly to Mr. Zappone went to school in Washington, D.C. I went in Seattle, and I actually interned in Olympia for former Congressman Denny Heck, who's now our lieutenant governor. Still have a relationship with him and his staff, which is something that I think could be very beneficial because we know as in our schools, a lot of the investment comes from state funding. So how can we get those dollars home? I also tout endorsements from Senator Billig, Marcus Riccelli, and Tim Ormsby, so there are great relationships there. I'd like to point out that Representative Ormsby is the appropriations chair who has a lot of say of where the money goes. So bringing those dollars back home to our schools is going to be a priority to me, and I hope to make that a priority to them as well.
Thank you all. For our next question, I'd like to talk a little bit about planning for climate resilience, especially given the fact that those who are most vulnerable are hurt first and worst. For instance, as we found last summer, due to climate change, not only do we need warming shelters in the winter, but now we might also need clean air and cooling centers in the summer. This is just one example of the sort of planning and investment that is needed. We might cite others related to windstorms, flooding, and more. Candidate Zappone, first to you. If elected, what concrete plans or specific investments would you support to help Spokane be more resilient to climate change? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my first answer, that the future we need to start planning for it, and right now we don't have a plan. And so I think the first thing we need to do is study what will be the impact of climate change on our city, on our most impacted communities, and start creating interventions and ways that we can do that. But if we don't have a plan, if we haven't studied how that's going to impact our local area and our local region, then we can't take action to prevent it in the future. Part of that too is both health impacts, but also economic impacts. Right now, a lot of our economy is driven by outdoor events in the summer, Bloomsday and Hoop Fest and Pig Out in the Park. And if we have summers that are smoky and hazardous and we can't be outside, that's going to have an economic impact on our industry. So that's a way for us to reach out to people who traditionally don't think about climate change, but extend our hands and say, hey, this is going to impact all of us. What can we all do together to make changes to keep our area healthy and thriving and prosperous? And so I guess I would start with specifically looking at studying the impact and then creating plans around that.
You did a really nice job of talking about plans. The other part, do you have any thoughts on specific investments that you would make in the community to address climate change?
Yeah, I think clean air is going to be one area in the future. The last 20 years, of the last 20 years, it was only in the last 4 years that we've had days over the AQI has been hazardous. And so we're going to have to look at how can we keep people really healthy with the air. I think that's a way, air filtration systems, people that don't have it, buildings, and so looking at air is one area.
Thank you, Candidate Zappone. Now to you, Candidate Smith. If you were elected to the school board, what concrete plans or specific investments would you support to help Spokane public schools address climate change?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, talking about the physical infrastructure of our buildings and how can we make them more resilient. Actually, as recently as I think this past week at Mr. Zappone's school, they lost power. How are we prepared for that for our students? How can our days continue without interrupting our students' learning? Do we have backup generation systems because of windstorms? These are things that can happen any given day, unfortunately. I think investing in clean energy sources, our school buildings are set up properly for solar installation and can power at least part of our schools. How can we start thinking about that transition now so that 10 years from now we have fully transitioned. And I know that the Student Advisory Council that has recently been formed is leading a lot of work on that, and our electric transportation system. Those are spaces that I would really like to partner and advance that mission. I think it's important that we understand it's not going to happen overnight, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start the work and get it going now. So I think that that's something we should really be thinking about.
As you know, we're building 3 new middle schools and really have made a huge historic investment in our community in building these new schools. To my knowledge, they're not including solar on the tops of those schools. Do you think that was a mistake?
It's always easy in hindsight to say, right? I think that it would have been my preference, but I'll admit that I don't know the details of budgetary restrictions or other things that might have been placed. But I do think that it should have been made a priority and that we should have been doing everything that we can while it was financially feasible, excuse me.
Thank you, Candidate Smith. Now to you, Candidate Sherazi. If elected to City Council, what concrete plans or specific investments would you support to help Spokane be more resilient to climate change?
So one of the things that I've kind of seen done across the world is that you plan for a city that once you're done with the infill, once you're done with the density, how are you going to account for the sprawl? So we already have a plan in place for the central city line. I would like to see that converted as part of our infrastructure plan to be a light rail by electric going around the city. So kind of like the perimeter of the city, so that when we're done with the infill and the density and we're ready for the sprawl 30, 40, 50 years from now, hopefully, then we already have that in place so that it doesn't just stop at Spokane Community College at the moment, but it goes around the city. It cuts back on carbon emissions. It cuts back on commute time, which is a huge benefit. And then, of course, you have the ability to get the jobs that you want. You're not thinking, okay, I can't commute very far away, therefore I can only have jobs that bring me into this area and not the rest of the city. So these are things that we really need to think about infrastructure-wise and how we can continue to maintain the green footprint that we want to create for Washington State. One of the things that I'm truly happy about is coming to live in Washington State, because I honestly feel the leadership that we have is really committed to making sure that with our wind and our solar and all the things that we can work on to make it a greener society and a greener economy, it's going to happen. So these are things that are very real and they can be fixed and they can be done now if we think about them now.
Thank you. Candidate Wilkerson, if elected, what concrete plans or specific investments would you support to help Spokane be more resilient to climate change?
We don't have all night. I only got 2 minutes, so I'll be quick. So first of all, I will continue to advocate operationalizing our response to climate crisis, i.e. the warming shelters or cooling shelters. Every year, the city has scrambled. It does not have anything designated, no designated funding for that. And so we are always, I'd say, caught with our pants down. Also, I am very into land use and where land use and smart growth will happen. That comes from planning. We are also looking at transportation issues. So there is a significant number, I would say about 55% of the people who work for the city live outside the city. So how can we do things to incentivize people to live closer to where they work? One more challenge is with this housing issue is if you drive I-90 going to Coeur d'Alene, you have all seen the significant increase in traffic. And so we have to look at what are we doing again with land use, because now we're polluting the air because there are more cars on the road, but they don't have anywhere to live. I mean, so we have to have this whole holistic approach and be very intentional. So yes, investment in climate change. Trees is another big thing I support. We have a tree program in the city. You've all seen the maps of tree deserts in Spokane and how some neighborhoods are cooler than others. How can we work with neighborhoods who don't own their home, but we can go in, plant the trees, and how come the city can't water them? Because those are renters, and some of them can't afford to do that. So those are some small things that we could take on as a city with financial commitment, and then we could go on to transportation, housing, and then crisis management, and working with our partners when crises happen. So like a crisis management plan, city doesn't have one, but we're working on one. So look for that coming to a newspaper near you soon.
Speaking of that, candidate Wilkerson, since you sit on city council now, as you know, soon coming before you will be the revised sustainability action plan for the
Yes.
city of Spokane. Will you be voting in favor of that?
I am.
Thank you.
I am, yes. There has been a lots of debate back and forth. The greenhouse gases thing just kind of blew up. It was going on the ballot. They looked at that, worked with partners. It came off the Sustainability Action Plan. I think there's work to do in that area, but this is the first concerted effort and initiative the city has taken down this road. And I think we're being very progressive and showing leadership.
Thank you, everyone, for those great responses. I would like to transition. There has been an increased awareness that, like the pandemic, climate change affects communities of color and those with fewer material resources first and worst. Because of this, many people know that global warming is an intersectional issue. Candidate Smith, how would you, as a school board member, work towards a brighter future for all members of our district community, regardless of race or socioeconomic status? So to repeat the question, how would you, as a school board member, work towards a brighter future for all members of our district, regardless of race or wealth? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, really important. And I think first and foremost is we ask these communities what they would like to see. Too often we have communities where decisions are made for them and not with them. And quite frankly, it's not an outcome that they would want. So first it starts with the outreach to the most impacted communities, and that outreach needs to be targeted to those most impacted communities. And then second, we need to work with partners at our disposal, like the city, for example, in talking about tree deserts. The school district has a lot of more in-depth data on different families and their situations than the city has, or the state. The problem is the city and the state have the money, so it's time for us to collaborate on a solution where we can come together, and the city and the state can use the school board as the outreach in figuring out what solutions are best and where they should be targeted, and then we can actually seek out those funds from both the city and the state and actually see it happen versus talking about it and seeing no action, which has happened for far too long. I think it's time that we get a concerted effort rather than these people trying to do this, these people trying to do this, and those people are over there with the money in their bags and they don't know who to give it to or what to do with it. So I think it's time for the school board to be more of that community level outreach and bringing our proposals to the people who have the money to do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Candidate Smith. Candidate Sherazi, if elected, how would you as a city council member work towards a brighter future for all members of our community, regardless of socioeconomic status or race?
We have a really good first stepping stone in place right now with the Sustainability Action Plan. It's coming up for vote, and that's the first thing that we want to do is to make sure that it passes. I've been on the Environmental Justice Subcommittee for that, and part of that has been talking to a lot of folks, communities of color, who were stakeholders, whomever wanted to come to those meetings. There was one this afternoon at noon, and we basically have been making sure that people out in the community have had a chance to give input. Once the data is collected, we're going to look at it, we're going to disaggregate it, it's going to be made public again, that this is what we found, and then we'll take it from there. But the main thing is that once I'm on the council, we're sitting in Gonzaga, which is in my district. It's the largest employer of, I believe it's the largest employer in the city of Spokane, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Brian? Do you know? No. Okay, never mind.
A large employer.
Okay, a large employer. Yes, thank you, Betsy. So the main thing to know is that this is really important because we have the lowest we have two of the poorest zip codes in our district, in my district here in Hilliard. We are very Hilliard proud, we are very Hilliard strong, and we need to make sure that we get the sustainability efforts and like a green canopy and whatever works for our communities in this district. I will always be the first one to talk about as a champion for this district. And so this is what I'm going to be doing on Spokane City Council, is making sure that we follow through with the plans and the input that we've received from the communities of color so that people can be invested in it and we move forward.
Thank you, Candidate Sherazi. Candidate Wilkerson, same question to you. If elected, how would you, as a city council member, work towards a brighter future for all members of our community, regardless of socioeconomic status or race?
Well, first of all, let me say that is why I put my name into city council to be appointed, and that is why I am running to retain my seat, to elevate those voices that have not been heard. Now, let's be clear. Climate change has been seen something of an elitist position, primarily among white folks. So we have to recognize there have not been a lot of people of color at the table to actually represent the position of people of color. Now, for me, I think it's important that they all come, and it doesn't discriminate. Climate change does not discriminate. I don't care how much money you got. You know, if you're in Katrina, you're in Katrina. But we have to be intentional, again, about the decisions we make, bring them along, have them at the table, help them understand. I'm really excited about the school district because a lot more kids of color are learning about climate change in school. In their homes again, the environment is slowly and softly killing people, more than police violence. So we have to acknowledge that first, the acknowledgement of the issue, and then we will address the issue. So that is my role as council, to make that voice heard, to step into that space, and to advocate for the outcomes we want.
Thank you, Candidate Wilkerson. Candidate Zappone, now to you. How would you, as a city council member, work towards a brighter future for all members of our district community, regardless of socioeconomic status?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be looking at the whole community and breaking it down and tracking it. We know that if it's not being tracked and we're not keeping track of goals of how that impacts different populations by class and by race, then it's not important to the city. So we need to be keeping track of it. And then I'm also a big proponent of creating a systematic way to incorporate it into our policy-making process. I worked for the city of Seattle in the Department of Transportation, and they had a racial and social justice toolkit that they applied to every policy as they did it, making sure that they did appropriate outreach to every community, translated the materials into the community, and got that feedback into their policy-making process, making sure that stakeholders were involved. And so I think that every policy that the city puts out, whether that's bike routes to the Sustainable Action Plan, it needs to go through a racial and social justice equity toolkit. And I know the Sustainable Action Committee did a great job on that, but I think every policy needs to be going through that. On top of that, oops, I was going to keep going on that, but I'm switching now. So we have to have the toolkit, we have to do the outreach, and then we have to have the different levels that policy is created and made. When it comes to council, we're the last people to really have the last say in it. There's gone through a long process of stakeholders that have been involved and different groups of power that are involved. And so we need to be making sure that we have diverse perspectives on committees and subcommittees at the very beginning of the process. And part of that is making sure that people who are on those committees aren't just those who are privileged and have the time and are available to do that, but that we're actively setting goals around making sure that they're representative, and that might involve compensating people for their time to make sure that they're able to be part of our process. And so those are some of the goals that I think that we can do that would impact climate change, like economic policy, housing policy, and all policy in our city to make sure that it's inclusive of everyone in our community.
Thank you so much, candidates. We're in this unusual position of being ahead of schedule, and my inner German is really happy right now, so that's good. We're on ahead of schedule. I have an additional question which I didn't have down, which I'd like to ask, in particular city council candidates, although candidate Smith, you're welcome to weigh in as well. My question is about I don't think it's controversial to point out that there's a historically strained relationship between the last two mayors and city council, particularly on issues related to climate change. For instance, in 2018, city council passed an ordinance committing the city to 100% renewable electricity and insisting on creating a sustainability action committee. Council passed that ordinance overwhelmingly. Mayor at the time vetoed it. City council overrode the veto. So it went into effect. This is on the city books and Spokane Municipal Code. But the mayor's office, as far as I can tell, ignores this law, is not implementing it. In particular, has in fact refused, both mayors have refused to appoint anyone to this city committee that is in Spokane Municipal Code. This is just an example of this tension, which unfortunately seems to manifest itself in many different areas in city government. So my question for you, and I'll maybe just go down the line in reverse order since we this time. If elected, what would you do to ensure that climate laws that are passed by council are implemented by the administration? Or if you would rather, how will you ensure that there's a more effective relationship between council and the mayor's office? And I'm not sure, Kennedy Smith, if you want to weigh in on this one or not, but.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to go first?
I was just going to say.
I was like,
I was just going to say, you know, this isn't super pertinent to my race, but that's why it's important to elect these three folks, is because there are people here who don't quite share any beliefs that we do in this room that aren't here. So that's my little pitch for these three.
Does the question make sense?
Sure. I'm
Please.
ready. So, first of all, communication is key. And there has been this tension between city council and the administration. And we have passed ordinances, we have done resolutions to really promote what the citizens want us to do. The challenge is our city structure. Council can only legislate and do the budget. Now, our commitment is we have to fund what we say we want done. We have to put the money in the budget to make it possible to do the work. After that has been done, it goes over to the administration, because that council cannot direct staff. That is not our role. So this is where I start telling the community, this is where you come in for your advocacy. So you write and you call and you ask the administration, why aren't you doing the work that council has funded and the citizens have voted in? I will say I'm a bridge builder. I work very well with the mayor's office. I come out of mental health. I can work with anybody, so I just want you to know that. But relationships is critical to make that bridge work. And city council is supposed to be nonpartisan, because we are here for Team Spokane. It's not Republican or Democrat. What is the best outcome for the citizens of the city? And then to remind business that business and economic development is not an enemy of climate change, and climate change is not an enemy of business. It really should work together in tandem for the best outcome. But that will be challenging as we go forward, so I'll put my plug in. I'm in. So I'm advocating for these two because it takes a supermajority on most of the issues that we address to get past veto-proof vote from the mayor.
Kenny Sherazi, did you want to weigh in on this relationship between council and the mayor in helping to get successful action, right? Because what we need is implemented action. And so as kind of Wilkerson's rightly pointing out, you know, we're looking for nonpartisan sort of action. So it's a tough question, but how do we get progress?
Well, the beauty of it all is that if the three of us make it, we already have this beautiful built-up relationship. I believe in relationships. I'm a community builder. I'm a community organizer. I believe in building coalitions. Therefore, with Council President Biggs, with Lori Kinnear, whoever, all of us for that matter, you know, we have these relationships. Even with the mayor, I mean, I was astounded a little bit that she just outlined a budget that included something that she's talked about the fire season or something that, you know, she's putting some money aside. The beauty for Spokane City Council is that we control the purse strings. We can use that as pressure, as leverage to make sure that the things that we want seen happen actually happen. So we have that relationship. We have a progressive majority. With the three of us on council, if Betsy gets reelected and we get elected, we will continue to maintain that, and that means we will continue to move forward. And this is really, really important for Spokane City, not just for any city, not just for any district, not just for particular communities, but for the entire city. We need this.
All right. I couldn't agree more. Please elect us. But absolutely, I think if we want to make progress, we can't lose the ground that we've already made. And so if we don't maintain a supermajority, we will lose that progress and we'll lose that momentum. And so it starts there, but that's a building block, but it doesn't turn into the administration. Betsy, you were joking that you come out of mental health. Well, I used to work with 30 middle schoolers. And so if you're a teacher and you work with 30 middle schoolers who are irrational and are able to make a cohesive community where you're able to learn, I think I can bring some of that bridge building also with me to council. And we'll work with the mayor and the administration on that and looking at where do you find that common ground. We might not get everything we want, but having something implemented over nothing is progress. And so looking at that common ground and making that case of how climate policy really is also economic policy and economic development in our city. No administration wants to go down for having Hoop Fest canceled permanently. That would be pretty bad. And so we need to look at how can we make those changes now to preserve our future, because you don't want to have that legacy, and finding that common ground.
Thank you, candidates. I think we have one last question before closing statements from Will.
Yes, we do. So a lot of you guys have talked about community, and community is definitely super important to everyone here. I wanted to kind of get into the specifics of that. So what specific plans do you have to engage community members? So we'll start with Zappone. You have 1 minute. What specific plans do you have to engage community members?
Yeah, I think reaching out to community, engaging community members is showing up. That's showing up to forums like this and learning about issues that are important to you all. It's about showing up to the community center. It's also about showing up to everybody. And so I think that's part of it. It's also showing up to the doorstep and learning about people who aren't traditionally involved in the process and getting them involved and talking to them. So specific plans for engaging community is showing up, listening, bringing those policies back, and then also making strategic plans and making sure you're having a checklist and engaging them throughout every policy, kind of how I was talking about before.
Thank you. Candidate Sherazi, on to you. What specific plans do you have to engage community members?
Specifically, I feel that we need to create more awareness and education around climate change and the global warming effects, all of this. All our different groups that work with us, like Sunrise Youth Group, or whether it's the Sierra Club, or whether it's Spokane 350. And of course, the Center for Climate Change right here in Gonzaga, the relationships that we have here, I mean, Gonzaga and Spokane need to kind of overlap on a lot of different things. I know we do on some things, but there is a lot of room because there's so much research and information available that can be used, and something to the tune of 8,000 students and 2,000 staff and faculty, that's a lot of folks who can get engaged in the community. I think that's step one, that we can actually make it happen. The second thing, of course, is very, very important that we continue with our neighborhood councils and empower them to take it at that grassroots level. Those are so important. Those are people with their finger on the pulse of the community right there.
Thank you. On to you, candidate Wilkerson.
So engaging in community, I'm going to take a little different bent. So I have been involved in many city organizations, foundations, healthcare. This year, with our homeless population, which goes into climate change and all those things, because I have relationships and have served on those boards, I have been able to bring Anovia Foundation, Empire Health Foundation, Providence Foundation to the table to share and to commit to making a difference. Sacred Heart, it's a public health issue. What are you doing? What are you saying? Anovia Foundation, you fund many things. What are you saying? What are you doing? Empire Health Foundation, you do many things. What are you saying and what are you doing? So being able to bring new players to City Council and new voices that have been in our community the whole time and we haven't heard from that, I think that as leadership, I will continue to do that along with the other voices that are already being heard and continue to advocate for the voices that have not been heard.
Thank you. Candidate Smith, what specific plans do you have to engage community members?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I ran actually was I've spent 13 years in the schools and I feel really grounded in the community. Although I know that I'm not representative of the entire community and there are plenty of opinions out there that I need to seek out. I think that, holding a monthly town hall where constituents can show up and ask questions, I don't think that's something I've seen a school board member do before. I think also that's something that we should be talking about that Dr. Henning mentioned earlier. School board doesn't have district boundaries when it comes to elected officials. If I'm elected, am supposed to keep tabs on virtually the entire city of Spokane, which is the school boundaries, while doing it all on a volunteer basis. I think that it's really important that we start talking about representation from different communities. We just drew new school boundaries that basically allocate boundaries for all 5 high schools. There's 5 seats. It seems pretty simple to me that we could have 5 directors from different areas of the city. Right now, all of them live south of the river. I myself grew up, went on Indian Trail, went to North Central, Balboa, Sauk. I'm really rooted on the north side, which is another perspective that I think that we should be bringing because there have been decisions where the north side has been left behind, and that's been brought to light here recently.
Thank you.
Excellent. Candidates, as mentioned before, if you'd like, now's the time where you can elect to make a closing statement. So I think we would start actually proceeding from Candidate Smith and moving in this direction. So Candidate Smith, you have up to 2 minutes for any concluding remarks that you'd like to make.
Yeah, so I'm Riley Smith, as you all know by now. I'm running for Spokane Public Schools Board of Directors, position 4. I'm really running to bring a Spokane Public Schools voice to the board. Right now, we have a board that bring a lot of great diverse perspectives that I appreciate, but we only have 1 Spokane Public Schools graduate actually serving on the board. I think it's important that our members are rooted and grounded in the community and that they've experienced what our students are experiencing in the classroom. I have relatives that are teachers in the schools, that I am grounded in the schools. I still have relationships from when I was in school with teachers from elementary school, middle school, high school. These are things that I bring to the table that I think should be brought to the forefront of this process. Also, I graduated within the last decade, so I'm a little more in touch of what's going on. And like I mentioned before, when it comes to climate policy in general, my generation is dealing with all of the impacts from climate change and global warming. So I think it's really important that my generation has a voice in how we're going to fix this problem. So that's really one of the things that I want to bring to the board and make sure that really our whole community has a voice in what's going on, not just those who are privileged enough to be involved in the process.
Thank you, Candidate Smith. So Candidate Wilkerson, would you like to make any concluding remarks for up to 2 minutes?
Thank you. So as you know, my opponent is not on the ballot, and so technically I'm running unopposed. But I want the people in District 2 and the city of Spokane, I am just as committed as if he or anyone else was still on the ballot to do the work. I have found out that I represent District 2, but every vote I make affects the entire city. So I bring that collaboration, I bring a new perspective, a different lived experience, I bring a small business owner, I bring experience as a single parent and the proud grandmother of triplets, spoiled to death. But that just solidifies my commitment that I want Spokane to be better. I want my grandchildren to be able to grow up here, go to school here if they choose, come back and stay here in a city that they love and that I will have been happy to say that I played a part in building. As many of you know, I'm the second black woman to serve on city council in God knows how many years. So I feel a particular weight and a responsibility to represent people of color. I feel a particular weight and responsibility to be a role model, not just to people of color, but to women, to step up in government and lead and be committed to the cause. It is a unified effort. And my other potential seatmates know we only have one vote. You have to be able to work with others to really get your message and your accomplishments across the board. So with that, I do solicit your vote. Get out and vote. It's more important now than ever that the voices are heard for climate change or whatever your advocacy is. I am asking you to do just as much work as you are asking of me.
Thank you, candidate Wilkerson. Candidate Sherazi, would you like to make any concluding statements?
Absolutely. So my name is Naghmana Sherazi, and I was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan, moved to Spokane 10 years ago. I'm an immigrant. I am Muslim. I am a single mother. I'm an educator. I'm a scientist, and I'm a renter. There isn't anyone like me on Spokane City Council. Everyone who's on Spokane City Council is a homeowner. Nothing wrong with that. I'd love to be one. I just don't make enough money to be one. And basically, these are the voices that I'm trying to bring with me to Spokane City Council. People who live in District 1 are really struggling hard to put food on the table. You know, once you've paid your rent or your daycare, once you've paid your mortgage, there's no money left to flex back on except on food or your medicine. There's so many senior citizens who live in apartments all down Nevada who are in that exact same situation. It was my situation right up until 2 weeks ago when I just resigned from Gonzaga, and because I wanted to focus on my campaign. I am one of those folks who lives one missed paycheck away from being on the street. I know what it's like to be homeless or live in that fear of being homeless. And my son was born here in the United States. He could be POTUS if he wishes. You know, he certainly has the mouth on him. He's 20 going on 48. So this is why I'm bringing all these voices with me to make sure that we have representation, being a renter, being the first unionized campaign on this side of the Cascades ever. I'm making history. So Betsy's already made a lot of history, and I hope to do that with being the first South Asian immigrant, Muslim, American, brown woman to be on council. But the main thing is, of course, that I want to bring voices like mine to the table where we are heard, people who are struggling very, very hard to make ends meet, and who are doing 2, maybe 3 jobs at a time. If you keep up with the news, you'll see the Realtors PAC has just dropped another $30,000 in my opponent's campaign. I need volunteers to go doorbelling. I need money. You can pitch $10 at me. I'll take it. It's $10 I didn't have 5 minutes before. So whatever you have going, come talk to Derek right there with my signs, and then we'll sign you up to volunteer on my campaign if you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidate Sherazi. And candidate Zappone, any closing statements?
Yeah, thank you all for coming out tonight, engaging in these important issues. It's an off-year city election, and most people don't even know what's happening. So I want to applaud you for being here, and please encourage you to spread the word with people that you know. My name's Zach Zappone. I'm running for Spokane City Council because I believe everyone in our city deserves a fair shot. I'm a teacher, born and raised here, went to North Central, just like my grandpa, and now teach at North Central High School. And there are a lot of challenges facing our community. I experienced growing up, and I see every day in the classroom. Just last week, I was talking with students who were struggling with mental health, homelessness, and not sure where they were going to stay this weekend, and also dealing with violence in the community and having family members who are killed. These are a lot of issues facing our community on the day-to-day. And then we also need to face the reality of the future, and what is the future going to be for our community? Climate change and dealing with the impact of climate change is going to be, it's here now, and it's only going to get worse. So I believe that we need to be thinking about climate change not as a separate policy issue, but how do we infuse it in everything that we're doing? And so how are we going to look at climate change, and how is it going to impact our housing and our homelessness services? How is it going to impact our infrastructure, our roads, our streets, our parks, our zoning, but also how do we create a work environment, a broadband internet where we don't have to rely on commuting anymore? And then how does climate change also impact our public health and our safety in our community? And so I can't do this alone. We do have a lot of work ahead of us in the next 28 days. Would encourage you all to get involved in all of our campaigns to make a difference. My website, zappone.com, you can get information over there. No change happens alone, so please join us and all of us up here in making that a reality. Thanks.
Thank you so much, candidates. Thank you more than anything for being here, right? For taking time to come and talk about an important issue. So audience, let's suspend our rules of engagement and thank the candidates. Let's, as candidates leave the stage, I'd like to give an extra loud zag thank you to our student co-moderators, Laurel and Will.
Thank you, Dr. Henning.
Did you like this? We're not quite done yet. Did you like the new addition of the student moderators? Was that a good addition? I think we might have to consider continuing to do that next year. So one of the core goals of the Candidate Climate Forum is to provide voters of every political stripe information that they can use to make more informed decisions when they fill out their ballot. I believe that our discussion this evening should prove useful to Spokane voters as they begin casting their ballots in just the next few days. In a little more than a week, actually, the county will begin mailing ballots. Our hope is that no matter how you vote, and this is a nonpartisan forum, no matter how you vote, it's helped you to understand where the candidates stand on this important issue. I want to sincerely thank my wonderful colleagues who helped make this possible. Our wonderful timekeeper, Dr. Patrick McCormick, thank you so much. Our audiovisual experts, Caleb and Nick in the back of the room, and Patrick, who helped us with the event planning. Please join me in thanking them. As a reminder, a recording of tonight's event will soon be available on our YouTube channel. We hope that you will join us for future events at the Gonzaga Climate Center. You can always find a complete list of our events on our website. You can go to gonzaga.edu/climate center events. And by way of conclusion, I would like to briefly read a passage from a portion of Pope Francis's speech from his 2015 visit to America. It was from the White House lawn. Pope Francis said the following: "It seems clear to me that climate change is a problem which can no longer be left to a future generation. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment of history. We still have time to make the changes needed to bring about a sustainable and integral development, for we know things can change. Such change demands on our part a serious and responsible recognition not only of the kind of world we may be leaving to our children, but also to the millions of people living under a system which has overlooked them. Our common home has been part of this group of the excluded, which cries out to heaven and which today powerfully strikes our homes, our cities, and our societies. To use a telling phrase of the Reverend Martin Luther King, we can say that we have defaulted on a promissory note, and now it is time to honor it. Thank you all for attending, and don't forget to consider the climate when you vote."